The evening started like any other dinner gathering, with my wife, Claire, insisting I accompany her. Her friends, whom I recognized from her social circles, greeted me with polite smiles and nods before quickly resuming their conversation. I was used to being the outsider in Claire's world, the extra piece that didn't quite fit, but I wasn't prepared for what happened next. The red wine struck my face, the warmth of the liquid tracing down my cheek before dripping onto my collar. I barely registered the sensation before realizing what had happened. The soft murmur of the restaurant faded as the stain spread across my shirt. For a brief moment, the entire room seemed to freeze, except for Claire. She laughed, not a nervous chuckle, not an apology disguised as amusement, but real, sharp laughter, the kind that told everyone watching that she meant every bit of it. "Why do you always act like such an idiot?" she sneered, swirling the remaining wine in her glass as if considering whether to douse me with the rest. Some of her friends stifled laughter behind their napkins. Others exchanged uncomfortable glances, but said nothing. No one dared to intervene. I sat there, feeling the wine seep into my skin, its acidic scent filling my nostrils. My instincts screamed at me to react, to retaliate, to throw my drink in her face, to shout, to walk away. But instead, I reached for a napkin and quietly dabbed at my face. This wasn't the first time Claire had humiliated me. The sting of embarrassment burned deeper than the alcohol on my skin. And the worst part? This wasn't even the cruelest thing she had done. I could feel the weight of their gazes, the anticipation in the air. Would I lash out? Storm off? Laugh along and let Claire win again? I did none of those things. Instead, I inhaled deeply, straightened my posture, and placed my napkin on the table. Without a word, I rose to my feet, adjusted my clothes, and turned away. The restaurant floor seemed to stretch endlessly before me, but I kept walking. Behind me, Claire's laughter rang out again, likely accompanied by another cutting remark. Whispers followed, some mocking, some murmuring about how I was overreacting. I didn't care. By the time I reached my car, my hands were steady. No trembling, no hesitation. I opened the door, slid into the driver's seat, and let the silence settle around me. The scent of wine clung to my skin, but it wasn't just the alcohol I smelled. It was the end of the evening, the end of the shame. As I pulled out of the parking lot, echoes of Claire's past remarks filled my mind. The dismissals disguised as jokes, the condescending smiles, the way she made me feel like an afterthought in my own marriage. It had been happening for years, creeping in like rust on metal, and I had allowed it. But tonight, I wouldn't. I wouldn't let her charm her way out of this. I wouldn't wake up tomorrow and pretend it never happened. I wouldn't accept another meaningless apology wrapped in an expensive gift meant to smooth things over. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the decision was already made. This wasn't just another cruel joke. This was the breaking point. Stepping inside, I locked the door behind me. The scent of home filled the air, a home that felt more like hers and ours for far too long. My gaze flickered over the framed wedding photos, the carefully curated decor Claire had insisted on. She had built her perfect life on my silence. But tonight, I wouldn't be silent. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the dark screen of my laptop. In the dim glow of the room, I caught my reflection, a man I barely recognized. I opened the laptop, reached for a notepad. My hands moved before I fully registered what I was doing. And then, I clicked open my pen and began writing. Not a letter, not a complaint, not a furious rant. A list of every insult, every humiliation, every moment Claire had chipped away at me. Dates, words, scenes I had pushed aside in the name of keeping the peace. Things I had tried to forget but had never truly let go of. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about hurting her. It was about remembering. Because for too long, I had convinced myself that maybe I was being too sensitive. Maybe she hadn't meant it that way. Maybe Claire was just Claire. But as I watched the ink bleed into the paper, something became clear, something I had refused to admit. It was never me. It had always been her. And it was finally over. I wasn't surprised when Claire didn't come home right away. She thrived on attention. There was no chance she'd cut the night short, Not after putting on such a show. She was probably soaking up the laughter, reliving the moment like a scene from a movie where she was the star. Meanwhile, I sat alone in the dim light of the kitchen, replaying the sensation of wine dripping down my face, the smug look in her eyes as she did it. It hadn't always been this way. Once, our home had been filled with warmth, laughter that lingered long into the night, whispered conversations that made the world outside feel small. But that was years ago. Now, the silence pressed in, suffocating. I glanced at the notepad. The list had grown longer, each line a reopened wound. Her words had started as harmless teasing, playful jabs I could laugh off. But over time, they had sharpened, cutting deeper, until they weren't jokes at all. God, you're embarrassing. You always ruin things. You're pathetic. It had been a slow erosion, relentless, unnoticed, until one day I could no longer recognize a man staring back at me in the mirror. And now, the truth lay before me, undeniable and absolute. Claire didn't love me. Claire didn't respect me. And I would never let her degrade me again. When she finally walked through the door, she wasn't expecting me to be waiting. She hesitated in the entryway, her usual air of confidence flickering for the first time in years. "Oh, come on," she scoffed, tossing her purse onto the counter. "You're not seriously still upset about that, are you?" It was a joke. Everyone laughed. I didn't answer. I just slid the notepad toward her. She frowned, confused. Then, for the first time, Claire fell silent. No sarcastic remark. No dismissive wave of her hand. No mocking smile. For the first time, she wasn't in control. And she knew it. I met her gaze, steady and unshaken. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm. Too calm. "I've come to realize something, Claire," I said evenly. "You don't love me. You love control. You love having someone to put down, to make yourself feel superior." She swallowed, her posture stiffening. "So don't pretend this is just another joke," I continued. "Don't try to make fun of me for calling it what it is." I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. I'm not looking for revenge, but I'm done. Her hesitation was brief, but I caught it. "If you're worried about a video, don't be," I added. "I won't post it." Her expression faltered, just for a second, before she schooled it back into indifference. "What the hell is that supposed to mean?" she muttered, shifting her weight. She was waiting for me to back down, to soften, to say something she could twist. But I didn't. She scoffed, rolling her eyes, then turned sharply on her heel. "Fine. You want to play this little game? Be my guest." I didn't try to stop her. For the first time in our marriage, Claire was the one walking away. I listened as she stomped up the stairs, each step heavy with frustration. She expected me to chase after her, to plead, to fix things. That was a pattern. I would call her out, she would deflect, and I would try, I would try, to smooth things over. But this time, I wouldn't let I remain seated, unmoving. Claire still believed she had control of the situation. She casually picked up my coffee, took a slow sip, and let the silence settle between us. She had no idea how much I had already unraveled while she was too busy making a spectacle out of me. While she spent the night basking in attention, I had been working. I pulled my phone from my pocket and opened my banking app. The numbers were exact. Half of our shared savings, the portion that rightfully belonged to me, was now safely in my personal account. Legally, Claire had always managed our finances, not because I was incapable, but because she enjoyed it. She liked knowing where every dollar went, how much was being spent, and most of all, the control it gave her. She was the one in charge of the bills, the credit cards, and the budget. She made sure I was never truly independent. Always comfortable, yet never in a position to walk away. But last night, I had changed that. I froze our joint account, moved my share, canceled her access to my credit card. If she needed money now, she'd have to use her own. Switching off my phone, I locked it, ensuring she wouldn't discover what I had done. Then, I turned my focus back to my laptop. My emails to the lawyer had already been sent. Simple inquiries, nothing drastic. The legal process hadn't started yet, But our marriage was already over, because I was done. I wouldn't be the man she ridiculed in front of her friends anymore. A sharp thud echoed from upstairs. Something had been slammed shut. A dresser drawer. Maybe. It didn't matter. Let her be angry. Claire had built our entire relationship on the assumption that I would always stay, no matter how cruel she was. That no matter how many insults she threw, how much contempt laced her voice, or how often she treated me like a burden instead of a partner, I would endure it. But now, she felt the ground shifting beneath her. The moment she sensed she was losing control, the panic would begin. I didn't have to wait long. She returned, phone in hand, her expression composed but her eyes burning with frustration. I gripped my coffee cup and didn't look up immediately, letting her stand there, shifting her weight from foot to foot, waiting for my attention. When I finally glanced up, something was off. She gave a short, hollow laugh. You think you're clever, don't you? I raised an eyebrow. I have no idea what you're talking about. She lifted her phone slightly. My card was declined. I took another sip of coffee. That's unfortunate. Her jaw tightened. What did you do? I set my mug down with deliberate ease. I secured my money. Her nostrils flared. Her sneer returned. You think you can just take? I tapped my fingers against the table. I'm entitled to half, Claire. Just like you were entitled to use our money to fund trips and shopping sprees you never even told me about. She rolled her eyes. Oh my God, you're still hung up on that. I shook my head. It was never about just one night. It was years of the same disregard, the same condescension, the same degradation. She pressed her lips into a thin line. So this is your way of punishing me? Hurting me because your ego is bruised. I smiled. No, this is me refusing to let you control me anymore. Her arms folded tightly across her chest. You're being dramatic. I shrugged. Maybe. Her eyes darted, uncertainty creeping into her expression. She didn't like this. Didn't like that I wasn't reacting the way I usually did. That she couldn't twist the narrative, couldn't convince me that I was the problem. She exhaled sharply. So what now? I studied her for a moment. Now, I start preparing for my future. Her lips curled into a mocking smirk. Oh, please. You wouldn't last a week without me. Then her phone rang. She glanced down at it, and for the first time I saw it, real fear flickering behind her eyes.